You may have guessed that we've hit some technical issues this morning. We normally have a little bit of time before we allow our audience in, but everyone could hear us. Luckily, nothing controversial was said, and we are beavering away in the background trying to find out what's going on, so we can fix it for the webinars ahead, because we've got a really full morning for you. It's the Retail Bulletin, Future of the High Street. We're pretty much running back to back right through from now until 1 p.m. today. We've got 4 brilliant sessions coming up, and I'm going to hand over to our guests very shortly as well. I'm Darren, I'll moderate the day. I will swim through these technical issues and try and get us out on the other side. But you are in for a treat with our first opening event we're about to do right now. If you hear any squeaking in the background, that's my dog Scamp. So I'm going to hand over super quick to make sure she doesn't disrupt us too much. But this title, The Future of the High Street, I mean, it's such an emotive one. We've been banging around this for a couple of decades around will the high street die, from its days of pre-online dominance through to the rise of the internet, through to the crash in 2008, when we saw an unprecedented amount of retailers collapse in that new year of 09, and then the continued dominance of digital, which seems to have eaten into our high street. Some people say the high street is dead, it's terminal, there's nowhere left to go with it. Some people say rubbish, there's absolutely loads that can be done with our high street, and it's about a completely new way of thinking. My view is people still love to go to shops, to feel, to touch products, and to be with other people as well. And so we're open to all views, and I'm going to let my fabulous guests introduce themselves, and then I'm going to be handing over to Rebecca to take the chair. So I'm going to start with you, if I may, Rebecca. You're going to be leading this morning's one-to-one interview with Bill. Tell us about you.
Sure. So my name is Rebecca Saunders, and I am the founder and CEO of Seekology, which is the place to shop independent beauty and wellbeing brands. You can see a few of them behind my head here. We launched in November 2019, just before the pandemic, with the view that actually what the high street needs is much more innovative retail that is flexible for brands, that is exciting for customers. And my mantra is really inspiration, education, and discovery. So helping customers discover new brands, helping them learn about the provenance of the products that they're buying, giving them some inspiration, hopefully helping them have some fun. I've run about 5 different pop-up shops now over the last 18 months or so. The most recent was in Covent Garden for British Beauty Week, which was a couple of weeks ago, where we were visited by Rishi Sunak, who told me that Seekology was a brilliant concept, which was lovely to hear. And prior to that, I did a pop-up shop on Oxford Street in the adaptive retail space called Souk, which is actually where I met Bill. So yeah, back to you, Darren, to introduce Bill.
Yeah, you've had some great press recently, and I'm looking forward to you taking the chair and finding more out from Bill as well. So, but well done on some of the exposure you've had recently, and well deserved as well.
Thank
Bill,
you.
tell us about you, sir. Sorry about those tech issues to start with. It definitely wasn't you; it was us. Who are you?
Well, thank you, and good morning, everyone. Tech issues of the nature we've had this morning is not good for an old man. I was panicking thinking it was just me. Anyway, I'm here now. My name's Bill Grimsey. I'm a retired retailer of some 45 years when I was working. I retired in 2012, having been the chief executive of 4 major companies, 1 in Hong Kong and 3 here. The 3 here were Wickes, Iceland Group, and Focus Do It All. I decided to write a book when I retired, which was entitled "Sold Out: Who Really Killed the High Street," which is kind of relevant to this morning. And then I didn't agree with Mary Portas' review in 2012. So rather than keep moaning about it, I put together a team and we wrote the Grimsey Review, an alternative view of the high street, in 2013. We did it again in 2018. We did one at the beginning of the pandemic called Build Back, a COVID review, Grimsey Review. And then in July of this year, we launched Against All Odds, how have independent retailers survived the pandemic? So that's what I do in my sort of retired state, if you like.
It doesn't sound very retired to me, Bill, but there you go. So, but yeah, it sounds like the busiest retired person I've probably spoken to in a long time. I'm going to duck out at this point because I'm going to let Rebecca take the chair. There's loads to talk about between you two. So my video will go off. I'm going to hand over to Rebecca. Have a brilliant session, and I'm looking forward to sitting back and listening to the content.
Thank you so much, Darren, for those introductions. And we will be in conversation for probably just under half an hour. Then we'll hand back to Darren at that point, because I know there's a busy day of great content coming up. So I'd just like to start, Bill, by hearing a little bit more about how you came to be here. So you were a CEO, as you said, of several different retailers, and now you spend your time as a really passionate advocate of high streets. So tell us a bit more about your thought process and your journey from one to the other.
Well, I guess when I decided to write the book, I realised that the retail career that I'd had led to some things which today have caused a problem. So there were three things that stand out. The first was I was a young fresh food expert, and we deseasonalized fresh food in the 70s. So we took all of the local produce off the road, and we had sophisticated supply chains from all around the world, and we gave you three products every day of the year, 365 days a year. So you know, that's added to the climate problem we have today, which I think is right up there as the biggest issue. The second thing we did is we cloned every town in the country. We made them all look the same brands, and I just think that it got boring. And the third thing that I did, I was the new store development director of Tesco's in the 80s. We went out of town, and we know that out of town bricks and mortar retailing devastated the high street. So I figured that in my retired state and having grandchildren, it's incumbent on me to try and unpick some of that stuff and make it relevant for today. So that's what led me to this. But the point is that there's a very, very prosperous future for town centres in the UK. I'm really excited about it. I'm also excited about young entrepreneurs and independent businesses being in the at the forefront, if you like, of the town centre renewals that need to take place, which won't be centred just around retail, and we'll come back to that later, I'm sure. But so I just want to help if I can, and so that's why I'm here this morning, trying to add to the debate.
Great, well, thank you. And on behalf of independent retailers like Seekology up and down the country, thank you for championing our cause, because sometimes it does feel like we don't get heard as much as we should. And I'd like to kind of explore that a little bit more, because your latest review, which was published just a couple of months ago, is specifically around independent retailers and also hospitality and beauty salon businesses. And so can you tell us a little bit more really about what does this burning platform look like for the independent sector at the moment?
Well, the independent sector that we studied was about 150,000 businesses. They were businesses of £5 or £6 million of turnover and below. So they were small businesses. And the first thing to say is that they are the backbone of the UK economy. Not only that, they are the backbone of community as well. So we saw during the pandemic that these people were very resourceful, resilient, and because they're entrepreneurs, they adapt to the situation that they're faced with. So what we found from the research is that they found ways of staying in touch with their customers. They went online, which they had been slow to do, and they continued to trade, not at the level that they had prior to the pandemic, but they survived. However, they took a massive hit.
Bill, just to give us a sense of scale, how many businesses are we talking about here?
About 150,000.
Right.
Okay. So about a third. Look, here's some headlines. They have 5 times as much debt today than they had when they went into the pandemic. it's about £1.7 billion. Not many of those businesses would have qualified for loans under normal circumstances. Their balance sheet wouldn't have stood up to scrutiny from banks. But because the government threw at them, first of all, a grant, rate relief, stopped landlords throwing them out, they survived that bit. And then they offered them these cheap loans, which they're now starting to repay. And it's those loans that are going to cripple them, as well as releasing landlords to throw them out for rent arrears, as well as bringing back business rates which are not fit for purpose. So they are now headed into a situation where we reckon about a third of them might well not survive. Now, if you imagine a chain of 50,000 shops closing, that would make the headlines. If it was Arcadia, if it was Debenhams, it would make the headlines. But because it's one shop in one town today, another shop in another town tomorrow, it doesn't make the headlines. And what we're trying to say is that this is a bit like death by 1,000 cuts. And so the government said it would do anything, I think Rishi Sunak said, we'll do whatever it takes. And the first thing we called on him to do was to convert these loans to grants. It's 1.7 billion. They've got the money because their ridiculous policy of giving all retailers business rate relief going into this was embarrassed by the 4 major supermarkets handing the money back. And so did a lot more others. There were some that didn't, which we won't go into today. But over £2 billion was paid back. So it's not as if we're asking the government to use taxpayers' money here. It was paid back, give it to these people and help them through what is going to be a very stressful situation. And the mental health of these people is of major concern.
And so you're talking really 50,000 businesses that could be gone from our high streets forever.
Forever's a good word, Rebecca. One thing I've learned in my career as a retailer is that nothing's forever and nothing lasts forever either. So you have to change every day, don't you? So, I mean, I'm very optimistic about town centres, as you know. I love businesses like yours that are pioneering new ways of generating a customer experience that with products that are relevant and sustainable. I mean, that's what the future's about. So that's why I'd like to offer my support.
Thank you. Definitely appreciate that. In terms of what's really changed over the last 18 months, obviously, the sector has been through a huge state of flux, particularly through the lockdown periods where many of these independent businesses were forced to close. But looking forward, what do you think has fundamentally changed? And what are the things that actually might go back to normal or towards normal?
Well, when the pandemic hit, we all sort of woke up and smelt the fresh air, I think. We've probably forgotten what it felt like in March, April of 2020. But I certainly, for one, thought, oh gosh, I could get a cold and be dead in 4 weeks. I know that sounds a bit silly today, but back then that's what it felt like. And so I started to reflect and think, you know, what's life been about? And, you know, we strive to accumulate things to enjoy our lives, and they're not always relevant. And I think there was an opportunity back then for government to capture a mood in the country to try and reset the dials in terms of our compass and our direction, because our direction has to take into account the fact that this planet is under enormous threat from climate change caused by human beings and industrial revolutions, etc. Now, we need to reverse that, otherwise our great-grandchildren are not going to enjoy the kind of lives we've enjoyed, and that's very, very important. So I think that opportunity's gone. I think what you've seen, particularly now with the chaos that's being generated by this fuel shortage, which is not a fuel shortage at all, it's being caused by panic buying generated by a leaked report from government, hitting the media hyping it up. And guess what? You get people's behavior that we're seeing now. And that causes a problem. We need to just look at each other and say, look, let's back off here a bit and try and find ways forward where communities and towns can reinvent themselves around their own brand, their unique brand, and create places that we all want to go and socialise and have a good time.
And on that note, what would you say the high street of the future will look like or should look like?
Well, what I think it will look like, whether I think what I think it should look like, I don't think is relevant. What I think that will happen is that we will recognise climate change, so we will decar our towns. I think that's absolute given. So when I talk to local authorities, because of climate change and because of the change of our habits, we are not going to own cars. As a society, by 2050, cars will not be purchased and owned in general. People will tend to rent cars when they need cars. And it will be easy and accessible, and there'll be businesses growing up as we speak that will provide that. They might even be driverless cars. So why not plan for the space called our town centres to be carless now? You know, how are you going to make that transition? Because it will create a space that can be reinvented using technology at the heart to create an experience for that community to enjoy, live, working and playing in that place, and also to attract visitors because of heritage. So there's clues here that says if we could get custodians of place, which I believe are the local authorities and I believe should be the chief executives of those, to be commercial animals, a different beast than we've got today, that actually says we're going to compete with other towns, create these wonderful places with lots of green parks in them as well, like small pocket parks. If we can do that, then we can create a wonderful place for people to gather and enjoy things, which won't be dependent just on shops. It will be entertainment, health particularly, education particularly, entertainment, events, and you know, and a unique place that can't be replicated down the road because it's got an H&M. I mean, who cares? It's got wonderful, unique, independent businesses that are centered around the brand, which is whatever town you live in, and that heritage is there, and that needs people to latch onto that, and for place managers to reinvent these places around those brands.
I couldn't agree more. And I think you mentioned the word community there, which is something that's been really important to me in developing Seekology. And often when we have a pop-up shop, we try to bring in local brands. We try to tell the stories of all of our brands, but often when people come in and we say, we've got several brands from the local area, customers then say, well, which are the local ones? They're really keen to understand what's happening in their local area and to support other local entrepreneurs. And I think that extends beyond just retail. That's, as you describe, it's about hospitality and leisure and entertainment and events. And there could be an opportunity out of COVID to create something different and very exciting. Have you seen any examples of anybody starting to do that yet?
It's happening, right? Let's be clear about this. There are towns around the country that have woken up to this early and are doing stuff. Now, they're not complete and they're not the ideal solution, but they are very different today because of the local leaders or the localism on steroids that they've employed to actually create these places, working with communities and all stakeholders to achieve it. So I always talk about Stockton-on-Tees, which is in the northeast of England, economically deprived, with a visionary council, and they are doing remarkable things. I mean, like buying both shopping centres, moving all the retailers into to from one to the other because they don't need to, blowing up the first one, reducing it to rubble, creating a green park down to the River Tees, opening up the high street where they have got loads of events. I mean, just in that few words, I mean, it's just remarkable what they're doing. In the Sunday Times yesterday, it's Tuesday now, 2 days ago, was Scarborough with their wonderful hotel, which is being run down by a cheap owner that is just appalling. And I visited Scarborough, and they've got a great chief executive. And I said, look, get hold of the owners of this and, you know, do whatever you can to shock them into doing something with this beautiful building, make it the heart of your brand. And lo and behold, 3 months later, he's written to them. It's in the Sunday Times. He's going to get them in. By the way, they can do all sorts of stuff. Like, guess what? We're responsible for health and safety. And we will send the officers in. And if it's not got hygiene that's right up there, we're going to become a pain in your backside because you're not doing your job properly. So why don't we just buy it off you and you get out of town? I mean, that sort of stuff doesn't happen without great leaders who've got visions to take it forward. So yes, there are places. I mean, the Huddersfield blueprint is pretty good. You've seen what's happened in Stockport in Manchester is going pretty well. Ironically, it's mostly northern driven. I'm not seeing too many southeast driven. I think mainly because people in the southeast think it doesn't happen to them. They think it's something that happens only when you live up north of Watford Gap. But actually it is happening to them, and their towns are suffering, and they do need to recreate them, and they've probably got the best opportunities to do so. So it's happening, Rebecca, but it's not happening fast enough. Mm-hmm. And I keep bringing people back to what's going to drive this change is technology, because the elephant in the room, which is Amazon, is not going to go away. They are going to get better. They will have greener policies. They will respond. And they're going to offer a level of convenience which is going to be so great that people will keep using it. So just accept that and say, okay, fine, get on with that. We're going to get on with what we're good at, which is what you're good at, with your own presentations, your own brands, and you're creating wonderful environments. You've seen the success, you're getting the response from the communities. And if you can do that in towns where you're recognized as a community retailer, that you'll get the support. Look what happened during the pandemic. There were queues down the street of my local deli round the corner. And I said to Tony, he's Italian, he would have a name like Tony, wouldn't he? I said, Tony, just make sure that you don't just serve these people. What you need to do now is get a communication link. You're the heart of the community. Get a communication link with them. Say, thank you for coming to me. Do you want to get on my website? Do you want to get on can I get your email? Can I communicate with you? Because you need to retain this connection with your community, and you need to use technology to do that. Now, the sad thing is that the independents did try and do all this kind of stuff, but now they are all reopened. The non-essential ones have reopened. They've stopped it. They don't have time to do back office stuff or the resource. So they've stopped technology and they've gone back to day-to-day retailing. And my appeal to them is learn from what you enjoyed during this pandemic and have a multi-channel approach to your communication with your customers.
Great advice. And we talked the other day when we actually were lucky enough to meet in person about retailers trying to do things that Amazon can't do. So do you have any other advice for any other retailers on the call about how to really maximize those opportunities of doing things differently, but the things that Amazon can't do very well?
Well, the best thing that you can all do is club together. Okay, so it's not just retail. The health and beauty side of our high streets is absolutely vital to the future development of town centres. You can't get your hair done online. You can't get your nails done online. You can't get the health advice that you get face to face online. and try stuff out in that way. So, you know, that's going to be at the fulcrum of the future, that kind of experience. So if you like, if you look back at Boots, go back in time, Boots was a chemist. It wasn't until they put in the front of their shops all of those makeups and brands that people go in and sit in a chair and get made up every Saturday and have fun. That's an experience that they realised how important it is to have that contact. Throw that away because Boots is going to die eventually. Let's go back to what the opportunity is. Club together, form associations, and we had examples of that in our Bill Against All Odds review we just published, where these associations can actually work together to work with their community, work with their local authority and say, look, we're a band of unique businesses here that is at the heart of your future solution. So let's us all get involved together to find a way forward. So Amazon can't do that. But you can, and you can be at the beating heart of community. So we saw that during the pandemic. You guys often put the community before making money. I mean, I know that sounds, you can't do that every day, but you know, when push comes to shove, guess what? The independents stood up and they delivered. It wasn't the big multinationals that did that. They did that, you know, it's a blip in the ocean to them. It's that beating heart of community. So band together, get associations going, and get your local authority and your stakeholders in your community to realise that you are a chain of diverse businesses that are very strong for the brand that needs to be created, i.e. your town.
Well, I love this. Thank you. Very motivating for us smaller retailers on the call. I'd love to hear a bit more about your views on what maybe some of the other parties in this discussion should do differently. So what about landlords? What should they be doing differently?
Well, I think landlords have had a shock in the last 10 to 15 years because the halcyon days of commercial retail properties are over. All right, guys, sorry, it's over. Okay, so now rake up to reality. You need to think about your asset, which is your building, in a different way. And so what is it going to produce for you as an asset in terms of your return? Now, the way to look at that is not just increasing capital value or getting rent from some faceless business that you don't have any interest in. The way to do that is to look and seek and how in businesses that can add value to your building. And if you can imagine it this way, talk about stakeholder capitalism rather than shareholder capitalism. We've lived through the 20th century where shareholder capitalism has reigned supreme and free markets have reigned supreme. Well, those days are numbered, and they are failing. Look what's happened to the energy business, for example. You know, that free market has collapsed. It's just not working. So you need to rethink that model. The same thing applies to the property market. Rethink about how you're going to work with the businesses that are occupying your space. How can you get a model together where you both benefit, rather than I'm going to collect my rent off you, and if you don't pay, I'm going to kick you out kind of attitude, and see if you can find ways of having a stake in businesses. And that will, I think, produce a model that is quite exciting and will work.
And a real change, but actually that collaboration should really drive some completely different behaviour and thinking across all of that placemaking, shouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I think if the word collaboration is a fantastic word. If you're collaborating as interested parties to create an exciting commercial success that's benefiting the local community and is at the heart of the local community, then you are on a winning model. If you're going to be a faceless investor in a bricks and mortar and not really care what's in it, and in fact, in some cases where you're a faceless investor, and you're in the Cayman Islands because you don't want to pay tax here, and you've got a portfolio of properties and the three at the bottom are all shut, if your bottom right-hand return number is satisfactory, you don't care. And caring is what's important about the 21st century. Let's go back to climate change. Do you care? Do you care about the future? Do you care about your community? Do you care about the quality of life? Or are you just here to extract what you can, get on a jet ski and go, woohoo? I mean, you know, the fact is, I think people are changing. And I think people, you know, the baby boomers like me, we milked it for everything we could get, and we've left behind us some devastation. Hands up, we failed. What we need to do going forward is encourage and help a new way of collaborating and working together to create a better life for human beings in the future. And what better place to do that than the UK, with the heritage that we've got, to celebrate that heritage, to brand that heritage, and bring communities together to say, hey, we are going to compete with you down the road to get people to come here. So we're going to be different. And that's great. Competition is good. You know, I'm not a socialist. I'm somebody who really cares about stakeholder capitalism. So you've got a stake in your town. Get your town to be the best town in the country.
Fantastic. Well, look, that was a really inspiring note, I think, on which to end, much as I'd love to carry on talking all day. If anybody wants to read your reports, where's the best place for them to find them?
Well, I have a beat up old website called vanishinghighstreet.com because I don't invest in it very much. So if you go on vanishinghighstreet.com, all 4 Grimsey reviews are there in PDF form. They can be downloaded. They're completely free. And if people read them and get something out of it and they do something different, well, then that's great by me.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Bill. It's been an absolute pleasure. Hopefully we'll see each other again in real life very soon. And I'm going to hand back to Darren now.
Well, thank you both. Good luck for the rest of the morning.
Stay with me if you would both just for a second as well. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to summarize in a second if I could, but I also would like to, there's a question actually that's aimed at both of you. And so I'd like you both to share your view on the question before we wrap up the sessions today. So it's from Brendan at Experian. Thank you, Brendan. Brendan has seen that Pret-a-Manger are going to be opening 200 new outlets in the UK over 2 years. And given that people working remotely is set to continue, do you think retail outlets are going to be required more in the urban areas, like the convenience store format, over the bigger high street and retail parks that we were used to? So is it all going to be about urban and small format? That's what Pret are saying. Do you agree? Thanks, Brendan, by the way.
If you want me to go first.
Go for it, yeah.
I think that the change in working patterns is with us to stay. I don't think it's one thing or the other. I think there'll be a hybrid version. I don't think it's the end of the city or urban conurbations at all. So I think there'll be a balanced approach. But I do think that the 15-minute town centre, if you like, or the 15-minute town that people want to be able to get to within their living place will happen. And I do think that Pret are right in observing it. But who wants a Pret? I mean, give me a break. They're all the same. And, let's get an exciting independence in there doing better jobs than the Prets of this world. I mean, it's a private equity owned business. I've got a downer on private equity. I think they've left a legacy of debt-ridden businesses throughout the retail landscape in the UK, and they've added absolutely zero value. Pret's an example of that bucks that trend because the private equity is a bit better than that owns that. But I'm not a fan of chain stores. I'm, Costa, Nero, Starbucks, boom, let's get them down the drain. Not only are they don't pay tax and do things properly here, their bloody coffee's useless. So I don't get that. But so I want to encourage this spirit of pioneering that I think that UK people have. People like Rebecca, and she's chosen to go into the sector she's gone into. But if she'd gone into coffee, she'd give Pret a smack on the nose through her experience. So I think Pret are right to identify what they've done. Yes, the future is about more local stuff because we will have hybrid working. But at the end of the day, let's have independents doing it and not chains.
Got it. Thank you, Bill. What's your view, Rebecca?
Well, yeah, I'd like to think I could give Pret a run for their money. And I suppose part of creating Seekology was about a customer experience I thought was slightly broken about buying beauty products in a world where customers don't necessarily want to speak to somebody who's affiliated with one single brand, but want that impartial advice across brands and want to discover new brands that aren't owned by the big conglomerates. In terms of the location question, I think it's a bit of a cop-out, but I would say it depends. And it very much depends on the local area and the dynamics of what's happening in that place and how quickly town centres can make some of the changes that Bill was describing that they need to make. And I suppose some good examples near where Seekology is based in southwest London are that one of the places I'm very interested in is Chiswick. And in Chiswick, there's a very, very vibrant set of local traders. It's very independent driven. There are a few chain coffee shops, but it becomes a real draw. And what they've done in Chiswick is create a local cheese market, a local flower market, a local antiques market. And so every weekend there's something exciting going on that draws customers back in. And I think where there are places that's happening in local neighborhoods, then actually those will be the areas that thrive. And where maybe those neighborhoods are not so organized or a little bit slower to deliver on some of those things, then it may be, excuse me, it may be that in those areas people do end up still frequenting the retail parks or hopping on the train or the bus to go to a more urban center. So, it's up to us. It's up to the placemakers to make some of these changes.
Yeah, I agree. And we've had a couple of comments in actually, a couple of examples. So Simon, thank you for this share. He says that Woking Borough Council have purchased their 2 shopping centres and have borrowed nearly £1 billion to regenerate their town centre. So that's a positive story. Some feedback for you, Bill, actually. Robert says, thank you, Bill, for your honesty and acknowledgement of the damage done and the will to make a difference for the future generations. And then lastly, Bill, we do have another question that's just come in and I'm keen to capture it. We have got a bit of time. If you can just stay with us, we can run on for a few more minutes. Bill, this person, it's a TRB guest, so they're anonymous, but thank you, whoever you are. What is your view on the supply chain problems for companies? It's compounded by the crazy logistic costs that are going to, predicted to last throughout next year. Margin's going to get hit. It's going to impact prices in store. What's your view of this whole, hot mess that we're in right now?
Well, Darren, I think the term hot mess is absolutely right. I think we're in the middle of the eye of the perfect storm. You've got a pandemic that is creating havoc in its own way. But behind all of that, you've got Brexit, which has undoubtedly caused quite a lot of this labour shortage that we're facing today. And I don't want to start an argument about Brexit because it's done, but the fact is that it wasn't on the side of the bus, was it, that, the labour market will be hit for 6. So what you've got to have is, if you're not going to allow immigrants to come to this country who are prepared to work for lower wages. So you're going to have to up the ante to get the UK people to do the job. So you're going to have to pay more money for it. And so the argument being that in the future, the logistics chain is going to cost more, whether it's for people to pick fruit or for people to drive lorries. You're going to have to pay people better wages, which means you're going to have to get a rebalance to the distribution of wealth. So you're going to have stakeholder capitalism rather than shareholder capitalism. So you have to rethink the whole thing. Because of this eye of the storm, you need a visionary leader at number 10 Downing Street. It's going to say, hey, look, people, we are here, but this is going to require a very different approach to the future than what you're used to. I'm not going to just be talking about, building more homes or doing this, doing that. We've got to have to rethink the model, because at the end of the day, there is no doubt we are facing down the barrel of inflation coming back. Now, it's going to be, by the next couple of months, it's going to hit 4%. If it runs away with itself, I lived through the 70s. Let me tell you, 25% inflation is a horrendous thing to deal with. I mean, I lived through that. You know, I was a young buying assistant in the early 70s, and my 2 days a week, I was just adjusting prices. I mean, that's all you were doing. And so that we don't want to return to those days, but it's coming at us thick and fast. We have to redistribute wealth and create an environment where we are getting the kind of skills into our economy, and we're investing in people and training, and they're important job roles. And not, so we've made this decision to sort of be on our own. So we're not going to be reliant on people coming here to do our dirty washing, if you like. We have to do ourselves, but say doing dirty washing's great. It's a good job and you get paid well for it. And that applies to all the sectors as well, doesn't it? Health as well, I'm a little bit pessimistic about the immediate future. I don't have any faith in our current leadership at all, and I think that they've bundled their way through this pandemic, and apart from the vaccination program, I can't think of anything good to say about it.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree, Bill. I think it is all about leadership at this time, and it's easy for people, to sit on the sidelines. But there have just been so many errors and so many wrong judgments at so many different turns that our leadership, if we can call it leadership, is beyond woeful, and that's the polite version. So, thank you for sharing that view. We do still have people are coming in thick and fast now.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
On the chats, there's one about car parks and town centres and people going to out of towns.
Yeah.
Can I just hit that nail on the head? Look, going forward, I've already said there won't be cars in town, so we need to plan for that future. You are never going to be able to compete with out of town whilst we're a car-borne culture. There's no doubt about that. So, free car parking in town centres is a given, and it should have happened ages ago. But it's not about, that's an immediate issue. It's not the major issue of the future. It's how do we get mobility around our town centres that are pedestrianised, that have mobility hubs, that care for the disabled, that have good public transports, that are clean and sustainable. That's the future. And it's not just about car parks.
Okay, and then I'm going to wrap up with this one, but Robert saying, Bill, please elaborate on the importance and role that heritage will play in high streets and towns.
Well, it's a very quick story. I went to Penzance and I was walking around Penzance with the local authority talking about what their plans should be, because they didn't have one, and trying to help them get to it because I can't give them the answers. And I said to them, where are the pirates? And they said, they're in the next town. I thought, what are they talking about? And then I realised after about 2 minutes, they were talking about the rugby team. And I said, no, I don't mean your rugby team, because their rugby team is called Penzance Pirates. I meant the pirates of Penzance. Oh yeah, they said, yeah, once a year we have a festival in the town centre. We bring out the pirates. The place is absolutely mobbed. And I looked at them and I said, you do it what, once a year? And you're a seaside town. Now give me a break. You've got a brand to die for. Get behind that and let everything flow from it. Robin Hood in Nottingham. You know, if you go to Nottingham, you can't find Robin Hood. All right, you know, it doesn't exist, and you could create themes around all this kind of stuff. So, you know, my town where I live, St Albans, is the best Roman development outside of London, and it's 16 minutes from St Pancras. When you arrive at the station, there's no mention of Romans. I mean, so, you know, these are brands, these are identities, these are heritage. You know, and we've got such a wonderful history that every town I go to, I went to Norwich to do a talk last week, and I went on Wikipedia because I had a 2-hour train journey. By the time I got there, I knew more about Norwich than most of the people stood in the audience, because it's all online now. And there are wonderful, wonderful nuggets of branding that you could create around the heritage and history of your town that no one else can match, because it didn't happen in their town, it happened in your town. And that's what it's about.
Perfect place to wrap this. Thank you so much. I mean, if we haven't got, I think we've managed to cover all but one of the questions. So if you do have any further questions, do get in touch with us, and we can always get them answered offline for you as well. But I think, you know, Rebecca, thank you so much for sharing the conversation one-to-one with Bill today. Bill, compelling content as always. I'm sure people have enjoyed it. The audience numbers tell us they have. We got a big audience number. So thank you so much for joining us and for all of your questions as well. We're back at 10 o'clock with another panel, continuing this future of the high street conversation. But for now, Food for Thought is already kicked off. I'm sure there'll be much more conversation to come. And again, Rebecca, Bill, thank you so much. And we'll see you back here at 10 o'clock. Thank you all.